Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Anatomy of Movie. Today's destination is Deepwater Horizon, the disaster movie directed by Peter Berg, so stay tuned.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies. And now, here's Popcorn Talk's Anatomy of a Movie.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen, Deepwater Horizon, starring Mark Wahlberg. We're talking about it. We have Marissa Serafini. Welcome, Marissa.
Hello, everyone. Yes.
And I'm Phil Svitek. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We've got a lot to talk about. We'll make some comparisons to Sully, so if you haven't seen that, definitely would recommend that because there's a lot of similarities, as well as other disaster movies. We'll talk about the budget because I think that plays a lot into it. And as always, the forewarning that we have is we assume that you've seen the movie, so therefore it will be very spoiler-filled. So if you haven't seen the movie, go out, check it out. Or if you just don't care, then you've been warned. Also, you can download the rundown so to follow along, kind of all the things that we're discussing and some of the things that we might not necessarily discuss, but that we're pulling from as we make our arguments. And as always, let's start with overall thoughts, starting with you.
I enjoyed it. I went into it knowing what it was about, and I wasn't expecting what I saw. I didn't exactly know what to expect more so. I remember the day the oil rig explosion blew up because I was actually in college at the time. I was back home over spring vacation. And I remember in the morning my mom was like, "Did you hear about the Gulf spill?" I'm like, "What?" So I do remember that day clearly, and I remember the day they finally capped it. So it was a big moment in U.S. history just recently. And I went into this film expecting, how are they going to handle this, because it was so recent. And I think they did a really good job. They showed a perspective that we, as regular audience members, people who don't work in that type of industry, wouldn't know. And I liked how they showed everything that led up to it.
What I appreciated about it was that, I'm with you, it was sort of matter of fact. These are blue collar guys, they're doing their job, they just happen to work on an oil rig. They're not necessarily bad people. They're just trying to ultimately do their job. And as much as BP is kind of coming out and saying the various things about the movie. However, in all fairness, they were sort of villainized because you need that type of thing in narrative structure. But at the same time, the way you look at it, they were on the oil rig. Yeah. It's not like they were in London or wherever and being like, "Oh, just go ahead and do it." They were still there and took the same sort of risk. So I thought that was kind of an interesting way to tie that in. And overall, I enjoyed it. Half the movie was obviously kind of the various setups, and then once the action got going, which is crappy to say because obviously it's real life. Mm-hmm. And in some sense, it's not a snuff film, but there's that kind of controversy of especially with Peter Berg now, he's also going to be doing Patriots Day, which is about the Boston marathon. Mm-hmm. Is he just cashing in on this type of stuff? Well, my thought is it's interesting to kind of learn history and the way he does it. It has a very documentary feel, and so therefore I almost feel like it's worthwhile us knowing he's not just cashing in. He genuinely cares about this subject matter.
I really liked it, and I think it's good that he cares so much that he wants to really portray it in a positive light. I mean, and some people might not like the fact that it does hit so close to home for people, but I think if he does it in a tasteful way, then a lot of people can actually enjoy it and learn from these type of situations.
Yeah, you've seen Sully, yes?
Yes. I have.
Of course, because we did it. So definitely check out that anatomy movie. I do want to just really, before we fully dive in, kind of compare to this. Because that's a movie, while it's a quote-unquote disaster movie, it has a happy ending, right? You mm-hmm. know the ending, they land, everyone's safe and whatnot. Here, unfortunately, there's might be heroes, but the overall thing is not a good one, right? And I think that automatically just kind of sets it up, to be compared in a way where Sully obviously is doing a lot better than right now Deepwater Horizon is.
Right. I mean, and if you think about it, Sully is has a positive ending to the real life event. There were survivors, and this situation was so unexpected, as in Sully, but unfortunately there were fatalities, and so there is going to be some sadness lingering to what we already know in real life. So, I mean, yeah, it's kind of bad that we are comparing the two, but this one does unfortunately have a sadder ending.
It does, and what I can appreciate about both though is that the quote unquote heroes, at the end of the day, they're just kind of doing their job.
Mm-hmm.
They don't look at themselves as heroes. They're very calm under the pressure, doing sort of the best that they know how based on the training that they've received, and overall, making the best of it. Now, obviously, in Sully, as we said, there's no one that ultimately dies. In this one, it's one of the more sadder moments in the entire movie when you have Kurt Russell just reading out the names and just nothing. Mm-hmm. Nothing.
And then that sad realization that no one's responding because they did die. And again, it's like, I think what this film did so well is to show not just like the system of like fact checking each other, or like just checking each other's, that whole to-do list of checking each other's work and making sure that everything is done properly so the next team can come in and do their jobs, that check and balance system that wasn't executed properly, therefore led up to this explosion. And it's not really to point fingers, but it just shows where like it started crumbling and where the disconnect was that led to a big event like this.
Here's what I'm going to say, right? And again, I apologize because we're diving deeper than I thought right off the bat. But, what I appreciated about it initially, they didn't quite make it look like... Remember in Titanic, they make the Titanic like a marvel at the first half of the movie?
Right.
And in this regard, like the fact that man has made this floating island in some sense, mm-hmm. you kind of have to stop and wonder if like, it's pretty damn cool.
It is. I mean, and it just shows like how well man can put together, things built by hand, and just like the technology that has involved to keep it floating, literally.
Yes, indeed. But here's the scary part about all of it. I might frighten a lot of you guys, unfortunately. Yes, obviously, when you're talking about the things that went wrong and the margin of error. In life, there's so many things that we do, whether construction or anything else beyond that, right? Where if you really stop and think about it, the margin of error is big or small? What's worse, big or small? And
I'd say big.
All right, the margin of error. No, sorry, the margin of error is so small, right? Meaning you don't have a lot of wiggle room.
Oh, right. Okay.
That and yet we're willing to take certain risks in the name of progress. To achieve something. Mm-hmm. And most of the time it works out. In this scenario, not so much.
No, I mean...
that's a scary thought.
It is very scary because, like, that kind of just goes back to, you mentioned Titanic, and I just remember, like, the one man who was always encouraging for the boat to go at its top speeds just so they can make headlines like, hey, this is the fastest ship, like luxury ship that can reach these top levels of speed. And he encouraged it so much that had they gone at a regular speed and they weren't speeding, they would have slowed down enough to not hit the iceberg, So it's situations like that where had all these things been done properly first, they hadn't exploded.
Well, but is it, you can say it's properly, but even in that regard, like, just like with the men from BP, he was on the Titanic. You know what I mean? And he really did believe that it could hit top speeds and that there was nothing to worry about. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those. Yeah, you're riding fast. I don't know, whatever the phrase. I don't know any metaphors anymore. I'm losing it. But let's take a step back. This whole movie came about obviously because of the real life events, but more specifically the New York Times article. Written by David Barstow and David Rode and Stephanie Saul. Published December 25th, 2010.
So later on in the year, which it happened.
Very much, because this was in April.
Yeah, and I think it was good that, it's still relevant during that year, and people still know about it. And like they had just probably capped. How long did it take them to cap it? I want to say
it took about 10 days.
10 days. Okay, yeah, it took a while. But because of so much oil, but it's still relevant in one of the biggest environmental disasters, and so I think it's good to like still inform people of what happened because they know so much. But then like, oh, here's more.
Well, this was also conclusive as it could have been because you kind of went through the the research phase of it, trying to figure, right, just like in Sully, they were trying to figure out, okay, what caused this, right? So even though we didn't see that in the movie, that's where the article comes in, is now we know kind of what the cause of it is, why it happened the way it did. People have, were put on trial and weren't. And so it's more of a recap rather than like, the headline of like oil rig spills.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's good. I actually haven't read this New York Times, but I want to. So if it informs people more of what happened, then I'm all for it.
Well, it'd be interesting. I mean, there's got to be a more conclusive thing now, too. Because that was written the year. Now we're pretty much almost 6 years after the fact. So think of how much we know now.
Yeah, and like being like 6 years later, we can know like how much it actually affected the environment, the long-lasting effects. So I think there'd be a lot more variables to it that we'd learn afterwards.
Indeed. Also, again, another scary part of it, everyone, because it's true, it's the biggest oil spill in U.S. history. But the key word there is U.S.
U.S.
That means there's been worse oil spills outside of the U.S.
Everywhere.
And that's a scary thought.
That is, and to know that this was on American soil, but like it does really technically hit home. But I'm glad that they figured it out and like as fast as they can. I mean, I remember there was a lot of trial and errors of trying to put on different caps to successfully cap it. But I mean, it does take time. It's technology, and how do you fight a literally gushing flow of oil when you're trying to like just make something big enough and strong enough to hold?
Well, we'll certainly. They didn't get into that in obviously the movie, but we'll talk more about that. Matthew Sand and Matthew Michael Carnahan. They were slated to write this movie. Matthew Michael had worked on World War Z previous, State of Play, and The Kingdom. The Kingdom being another movie by Peter Berg. So yeah.
Yeah, well, those films, I mean, there's some action in it and like disasters more so. So I think this film is kind of a mix of both. And I definitely think with those accolades under the belt that they were able to do this one. So I think they did a good job in the writing. I understood what happened. The whole banter between like the coworkers to each other, like I get their friends, their coworkers, but when I got anything technology, I'm like, it's over my head. But I believe them because it was so like off the tongue and so fast paced dialogue. I was like, they know what they're doing.
Yeah, I did appreciate that. I don't know. I'm curious as to who you fully attribute that to, whether it's the writers or initially they had J.C. Chandler, who was supposed to direct, and due to quote-unquote creative differences, he bowed out, and there comes in Peter Berg, and his whole notion was that he really wanted to honor the people that died and to tell it in a way where there were heroes despite the disaster, right? And obviously Mark Wahlberg's character is one of those people, as well as Kurt Russell.
Yeah. I mean, I think Peter Berg did a good job showing each person individually for like their split moment in time. Watching the film and like afterwards, I think the most memorable people are obviously Wahlberg and John Malkovich, because he was so dislikable in the movie. But honestly, and I don't mean to sound terrible, but I don't really remember the guys that actually did die on the oil rigs. I mean, we got their names, but I don't remember what they looked like. I don't remember what they contributed. So,
most of them were in the mudroom.
Yeah.
The mudroom, everyone died pretty much in the mudroom.
Pretty much. And like I remember them, but like their names and like I really don't remember. But we did see them, and I think it showed really well their valiant effort of like when it first exploded, what they were going through, how they were trying to contain it and unfortunately couldn't. I think that was a really well done sequence.
I agree. And I thought Gina Rodriguez, they gave her, obviously, she was based on a real person, but the way I thought they gave her a lot to play with, you know, and it was a great acting exercise. And the most powerful moment for me with her, besides them jumping off the rig between Mark Wahlberg, was when, you know, her supervisor is saying, you don't have the authority to basically unlatch that or whatever it was. And she's like, no, we have to do this.
Yeah.
And then Kurt Russell comes and he's like, why didn't you do this? She's like, but it's just very interesting because, you know, in that regard, you can see her from his perspective, like there is a certain protocol. And you can't just, you know, whatever, the corporate structure, if you will.
Yeah, do what you think. Yeah, I noticed that too, and it was also very frustrating because it wasn't just her character. I was glad for her that she tried to stick up and do what she thought was right and necessary, but in fact, fortunately, that held her back. But it wasn't just her character, because I noticed throughout the movie that there were other people, you know, other situations. They're like, should we cut it off? And they're always asking each other, should they do it, rather than getting the actual command from the person who's in charge. And there's like a big bureaucratic system on this oil rig. And I think had the people in the top weren't so, you know, dismissive and combative a little bit and defensive on some certain aspects, things could have gone differently if people actually gave orders right from the get-go.
Well, you know, but it just goes to show, like, these are tough orders to give. Like, ultimately, how do you fully know? You can only know so much, and you base it off of experience, you base it off of math, as much facts as you can gather. But, you know, it's sometimes it's not, there's certain variables that you're not going to know. And, you know, they can lead to this.
Yeah.
So, doesn't always work out that way. I do want to. It's become. Amy Schumer did a whole sketch on this, and I have yet to see it. But basically, like the women at home. It seems to be like Sully had the woman at home, Laura Linney, right?
Yep, Laura Linney.
And obviously Kate Hudson is the woman at home here. Just the woman on the other end of the line, just waiting at home, being like, "Oh my God." And I think I can even date back to Apollo had it correctly, where like the women are waiting.
The wife was there.
And there was an ABC show called The Astronaut Wives, right? It was basically the wives at home while the astronauts go. So it's becoming more of a thing. You know, if you're the actress doing it, it's not really much, you know, of an accolade to play that part. But
I mean, like, it might not be an accolade, but it's also better for the audience too, because they are the voice of the audience, because they're the people who aren't in the know, and so is the audience usually. And I liked it every time we did go back to Kate Hudson's character. It was kind of like that moment to breathe from all the explosions, and we feel like we're in the hot fiery rooms with them. But every time we went back to like Kate Hudson or like the news or something, it was that moment to breathe and like take it all in.
Yeah, and you know, when the daughter comes in, that was a very powerful scene when she's, you know, not now, baby. Just trying to protect the daughter from all of this, but also just breaking down at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, but like, if you're in that position, I think most people would.
I do agree.
Especially if it's your significant other and you don't know. Yeah.
Well, just any family member, you know. I mean, remember, that's why the father, at the end, he's like ready to attack Mark Wahlberg, like, tell me about my son.
Right, yeah. Is that Trace Adkins? This certainly looked like Trace Adkins.
I'm not quite sure, but maybe. So yeah, I mean, so let's talk about the two. It's basically almost just two acts, very much like Titanic, right? You have the happy side, and then the bad side.
Yeah.
Once you get into the bad side, there's no going back. And I found it was most interesting of all how we're basically told by however old the daughter is, 10 years old. That's what it was. You know, how these oil rigs work. And you knew right away, as soon as that Coke just starts exploding, you're like, I know where this is going.
Right. Like, the moment he shook up the can, I was like, what is he doing with this? And, like, I understood. I did enjoy the build up of, like, this is the mini version of an oil rig, and this is, and everything else. But I did find a lot of the dialogue and metaphors, I don't want to say somewhat contrived, but it was really contrived. That, like, added layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of irony. Like, the audience knows what's going to happen. You go into this film, you know what the event is about. But it was just so many lines from everybody else, like, oh, you didn't do that, we should have done that. We should have done the cement test, we should have done all this. And, like, it was just so many different moments where, like, we know what's going to happen. And I don't know, I think it was just, like, one too many times. I'm like, okay, I get it.
That's one way to look, but also it does explain the how and the why. And it's one of those, like, especially in that situation, what we just talked about, like, having a certain protocol, like, you do have to sort of talk about it, because, again, if you make the wrong choice, it leads to this. And maybe that was the problem. Maybe they need to talk about it, obviously, a lot longer than just that. And it was, I don't know, I once... I did feel like, okay, perhaps I got it, but at the same time, I was like, okay, I understand why we're doing this. And it did make it interesting, because they kept trying to... It's a battle that no one was winning, and that was sort of interesting to see.
Yeah, I mean, and it was interesting to see, like, where the holes were missing in the workflow. Like, what was supposed to get done, what didn't get done, and, like, wherein lies the frustration with the coworkers who are now there, and even the audience members was like, these idiots should have done it, because this is what it's going to lead up to. I did enjoy that, and it made it understandable, like, oh, they didn't do a cement test, which, if you know cement, that obviously bases things and keeps everything together. But yeah, and it also, I don't know if you've ever seen Newsroom on HBO. Such a good show, go watch it. The very first episode, the pilot, actually covers the Gulf water spill. That was, like, their first major news story that they had to cover. And they go into, like, really investigative reporting there, but there was an interview where they interviewed one of the people who was supposed to do one of the tests, and they didn't. And we're like, okay. So, like, it showed us a different perspective, like, them actually doing different types of tests because someone else didn't do their first job. Yeah. And I liked how it brought that story to light that some people wouldn't know. Yeah.
The one that the part that was a little bit contrived for me, I will admit, but at the same time I laughed because I could see this so happening, was when he gets the award for, like, the number, the safest oil rig.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's taking the pictures, and then like, within 10 minutes this is all going to hell.
Yeah, like, again, it was irony. It was, like, so many moments and lines that was just so ironic. Like, I just had to shake my head.
But again, it's funny because, and I say funny with the loosest of terms. Please don't mean that I actually find this funny whatsoever. Mm-hmm. The idea that, BP, they care about their public image. They don't necessarily care about the real safety, but the notion of perceived safety. Mm-hmm. And so as long as we can put on a press hit that, like, oh, look, another year we're the safest oil rig, woohoo. Meanwhile, in the background, we're arguing about doing cement tests and negative pressure tests and all that.
Mm-hmm. It's like what goes on behind closed doors, which was also really frustrating. Made me, like, double think BP. I was like, wow. If you have a lot of money, yeah, I guess they spend a lot of it on their image.
Yeah, but it also makes me think of all the, like, the car commercials that say, like, voted the safest car, and I'm like, by who and how?
Right, by yourself. Yeah, but, like, just the Kaluza, right? Kaluza. Mm-hmm. He was so frustrating to watch, and he just, like, watching him. And then, like, trying to justify, like, we had the whole system of civilian mentality where, like, oh, sure, let's just do bare minimum of what we need to do, and then everything will be okay. And he was that kind of person. I'm like, no, you should actually kind of care about what you're doing.
Indeed.
Not because you have to, but because you should.
Yeah, but one of the interesting parts that I thought they chose to include very smartly was when Mark Wahlberg's character Mike Williams, they're with Mr. Jimmy, and Jimmy's asking him, "Does this make sense to you?" And Mark Wahlberg says, "Yeah, it does. It does. It kind of makes sense. I get what he's saying." Mm-hmm. And that was a good moment because it was finally a moment where, like, as much as everyone's argued up until that point, you kind of they gave a nod to the other to BP of like, okay, maybe they're not crazy.
Yeah. And it just shows, like, they know what they're doing. They know what's wrong. They should now actually go about and doing and fixing it.
Yes, absolutely.
And there was another moment, like, right when they got off of the helicopter and they're, like, all yelling to each other, like, about what they just finished or what they haven't finished before they left. And there was that quick moment where Wahlberg's character was like, "Did you hear what he says?" Like, "No, I couldn't." But that was like just a quick moment. I was like, okay, there's already miscommunication. So what else has been miscommunicated?
Mm-hmm. That is a good point. And especially on something like this big, like obviously they're trying to move very, very fast, but they've got, I forget how many, like over 120 employees on this one thing. Mm-hmm. And, to make one change, like you just saw, it takes at least like 20 minutes to implement the smallest of changes.
Yeah, like
from what it seemed like. Now imagine a big change.
Yeah, I did like that moment where they're like change the rig 10 degrees, and you saw like all the working parts of everyone doing their individual jobs just so it can move 10 degrees. That was pretty cool.
And 10 degrees, like believe it or not, that's
that's a little amount.
No, it's actually. I mean, if you really think about it, it's a big shift. Like. Yeah. 10 degrees, that's significant. You can go outside, right? For anyone that doesn't believe me, go outside and walk straight and then and pick a goal and then veer off 10 degrees for 2 miles and see where you end up. You'll be pretty far away from your destination.
Big destination, I'm sure.
So anyway.
Yeah, I think it was just a really cool moment, though, of like everyone actually working together.
Yeah. And again, that's where like there was that. I will commend him. There was that beauty and awe of like, wow, this is what we're capable of. Mm-hmm. So when humans are at their best, we're at our best. When we're not, we're not.
When we're at our worst, then yeah.
It just comes down to motivation. I feel like we, as human beings, like if we just put the right resources into whatever, like if we really, in some senses, this is gonna be shitty. If we want to like cure cancer, we'd probably do it.
I mean,
if we put,
there's a lot of scientific things behind it too. It's
I get that.
Easier said than done.
I get that, but with the right resources, if the right resources went into like anything, you know what I mean? If we prioritize certain things, they would get done.
I get it. If people are motivated enough and driven enough, and we wanted to achieve something, we could do it.
Yes. Anyway, we digress. Which character did you like the most?
Well, Wahlberg was great, but I did love Kurt Russell. He was great.
He was fantastic.
He was like the father figure that needed to be stern when necessary, but everyone still loved him. Obviously, I mean, they gave him an award, and in the end, he did look out for other people. Yeah, he got hurt and whatnot, but like he still cared for people's well-being. Things that still needed to be done, even in the moment of disaster. Like, he could think quick on his feet. Like, I liked him, too. He was very enjoyable.
I found it very, very strange that when the crisis hit, both Mike and Jimmy was showering, Mike was on Skype. Mm-hmm. It's nowhere to be found. But obviously then that's their call to action. Like, okay, gotta save everybody.
Yeah, let's go to work. I liked it, but it was kind of good that they were away from it. Therefore, they can go into it and like help save people and help do the right things. So, I mean, if they were in the midst of it, I think it'd be a different story.
This is true. I agree there. Anything story-wise that overall, it's a very enjoyable movie, but just plot-wise, very simple, very straightforward. I don't think,
It was very simple. I wanted, like, again, to compare to Sully, we did learn, like, after the aftermath of everything happened and what happened to Sully and his life. And we hardly got that in this film. I kind of wanted to know what did happen to the other people who were working on the oil rigs, what happened to the families of the ones who passed away. And I was very surprised with the very abrupt ending of this film.
Well, I don't know where else you could have necessarily gone with it. You know, kind of like Sully and Captain Phillips. There's that moment, you know, when he's finally walking through and there's just so many cameras and he's just so, you know, it's not what he's used to, right? I mean, he's an oil guy, for lack of a better term, and to have all these cameras on him, and especially for a tragedy, at least like with Sully, like they're in his face because he did something good, that, you know, and it's not to say that he did anything wrong or bad, but you know, he doesn't want to be questioned at this moment.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that. And if it was, I mean, the film is called Deepwater Horizon, so it is just about the actual place of what happened, not the families that were involved. But I think it was just like such an abrupt, it felt like an abrupt ending because we just had a whole like 45-minute sequence of fires and explosions everywhere, and then at the quick 5-minute wrap up at the end, you're like, oh, I guess that's it.
Yeah. Well, you know, you can only do so much. I mean, in fact, in our rundown, I included an article to the Washington Post that sort of compares, you know, Deepwater Horizon, the movie, to the actual events, and you know, their criticism of the movie is that it digs a little bit, like the problem, the reason why it arose isn't just based on what happened on the oil rig. It's, you know, also BP in Houston and some of the engineers and whatnot. But obviously that, to me, that would have just been too broad of a movie. It doesn't work like that. You have to, in this regard, you know, you have to pick something very singular and just kind of stick to it and you know, for better or worse.
Yeah, I mean, it was easy enough to understand that, like, X, Y, and Z didn't happen, therefore this happened. And if you get too many people involved, it would just confuse and convolute the story. So, I mean, I understand that. And, like, I understood, like, what BP's hand was in this enough to, like, okay, they were also involved in it. Now they have to be involved in fixing it.
Indeed. Where do you think... So Peter Berg directed this. Where does this stand in his ultimate library? Have you seen a lot of his movies? We've got
I've seen a
we've got
few.
Hancock, Friday Night Lights. I can imagine that's up there for you.
That's a great film. I've actually seen a good amount of Peter Berg's. I do love Hancock. That's a kind of a guilty pleasure movie. But I've seen Lone Survivor.
Lone Survivor's a really good one. That's another Mark Wahlberg one.
Yeah, and he's also done Ballers and Leftovers. So like he knows what he's doing. He has his hands in television and film. And I definitely think, I mean, it wasn't over the top like a Michael Bay film, and I think it had the good balance of the action of the explosion and the actual situation and what happened, and then the real life, day-to-day work of everybody and all those employees on the rig.
Well, I do think there's something more powerful to a sense of realism versus, like, let's say there, you know, I'm trying to think of another movie, right? But let's just say there's like a huge giant wave and like some guy is like trying to outsurf it and survive. It's like, okay, that's forced dramatics, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas this, if you can kind of put yourself in that situation, you're like, this is a real life event and they're not blowing it out of proportion. He's just kind of dealing with it and he's trying to do it the best way. That's even more dramatic to me.
It is, because that's something you can't escape. And that's what I enjoyed. And I think I liked he showed the different aspects of how the rig actually exploded. It's like, yeah, you're surrounded by oil, but you have it in liquid form. You have it in air form, like the gaseous form that who knew? Well, now that I know now, watching the film, but like oxygen helped fuel some of the technology that was there. And once that got dissipated because of all the oil fumes, that also helped cause
further.
The explosion. But so it was like not just the spilling, but it's like all the other things that oil can do in the different forms it was in.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, like that, at no point did I notice like actual visual effects. I thought it was just all real. It looks so good.
I thought it was real for the most part. Like all the explosions, there were some moments I did definitely think it was. Every time there was the underwater shot of you can slowly see under the surface of the ocean bed that the dirt is like slowly rising, and bubbles are rising, so like there's air pockets forming. That was obviously CG. And then I felt that the whole crane thing, I felt that was fake. Even though it was a valiant effort on the guy who wanted to move the crane arm to save people. Unfortunately, that ended his life. But it was a valiant effort. But I thought that was way CGI.
To me, I was all in. I didn't notice a single thing. I was like, oh, this looks fantastic.
Okay.
Part of it, what helps is that the camera's constantly moving, so you don't necessarily really get to register, what's real and what's not.
Yeah. I felt the most real part was when they were about ready to jump. Mm-hmm. Rodriguez and Wahlberg, they were at the very, very top. They had I like the moment where they had to actually climb even higher to jump up. And when they're talking on the platform and he's just like trying to calm her down before he actually throws her off, that looked real. I was like, oh my God, they're surrounded by fire. Just jump, girl. Like, go. I like that. That was cool.
And what I also liked about it just as a scene was that, he throws her and then he's like, and obviously he goes himself. But when he's searching for her, obviously there's that moment of, did I do the right decision? Because I can't find her.
Right. And also it was scary because, like, the moment he hit the water, obviously it explodes even more and there's just shrapnel flying everywhere and he's getting hit. Like, was this a smart idea? I did like it. And, like, I was thinking the exact same thing Williams was thinking during that. I was like, I just toss her off. Like blindside her and push her off.
That's always the way to go.
I mean, if you're not thinking straight, and like I think a lot of people wouldn't in that situation, like the best thing to do is just like get them by surprise and save their life,
That's always been my strategy.
I would have done the exact same thing.
So very good, very good. Steve Jablonski composed it, and he's in Transformers, Desperate Housewives. Yeah. And of course Deepwater Horizon. So he's got an interesting library. What I liked about the music, it didn't really it wasn't iconic for me necessarily, but not in a bad way. It helped to serve the movie, and I thought it did that well. Because again, the way they chose to do it, if it was more of a documentary, matter of fact, real life blue collar people, and so therefore if you had, like a Hans Zimmer score, boom, boom, it's
right.
like, no. It's a little over the top.
I think the only part of the movie I actually really remember was when after everything happened and Williams is in his hotel and he's breaking down. Like literally, that was like no moment of dialogue. It was just music, and I think that helped enhance like what he was feeling. Like he was so brave on the rig, and then he just broke down afterwards. I felt it, and I emoted with him.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. Absolutely. And the kids come and all that.
Mm-hmm. The wife comes back, and she's so happy he's alive.
The entire movie, so it premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival, and it received a standing ovation after the screening. So people enjoyed it right off the bat.
Would you give it a standing ovation?
Out of respect for the people at the end, yes.
Okay.
Again, there were some flaws that I had with the movie, but overall, I thought it was good. Which, by the way, I love. Like all the marketing basically used the scene where the girl's explaining from the soda can of what's going to happen. Then we got a couple of images. Like that was their whole marketing plan of like, let's just use this to explain what the hell the movie actually is.
It's eventually going to explode.
Yes.
That's it.
But I thought it was interesting. Before we talk about the actual box office numbers, the problem with this movie that people are saying why it's very difficult, this movie has an estimated budget of $156 million.
That's a lot.
It's a lot, especially for a movie like this, because you look at Captain Phillips, That was around 40 million. You look at Sully, that was around 40 million. Sorry, Captain Phillips was 55 million. Sully was 60 million. Bridge of Spies was 40 million. So no movie has really gone beyond that mark of 60 million. And so when you're basically, they not only double that budget, they almost triple that budget.
That's a lot. But if you think about those movies too, there's not a lot of action in those films. It's a lot of mental thrilling action, I guess you can say, and maybe in the mind, but physically not a lot is going on other than the fact they're moving around a lot. That's it. In this one, there's explosions everywhere, and oil is expensive. You gotta blow shit up. And so, learning those numbers, I thought it was very, very high too, because it is, but I'm not really surprised with how much we did see and how much was actually practical in their explosions. I believe it.
I believe it, but what I'm saying is it's going to be tough for this movie to make its money if that's the budget of most of these types of movies. Which, so getting to the numbers of what it actually did make, so far worldwide total is 32.7 million. So we're shy a bit.
Very shy.
It's it's going to take quite a bit to make this money back.
And and it's kind of unfortunate too, because it is so close in time to the actual event that there are still people alive.
Not as close as Patriots Day. They literally, there was a trailer for Patriots Day. I'm like, when did they make that movie?
Yeah.
Because it's Peter Berg, it's Mark Wahlberg, and how did they make this movie and just right onto that one?
I mean, I get it, and I think that kind of works against them in some ways, because there are people that are still alive who remember those situations and that day, and maybe don't even want to relive it, and won't garner that audience and their money for that. So.
Yeah. Well, the good news is the people that did see it, audience score is an A- for Cinema Score.
That's good.
Rotten Tomatoes has it at an 83 so far out of 174 reviews.
That's pretty high.
It's pretty damn high. So, critics are loving it and whatnot. It's just a matter of,
making the money back.
That's it. I thought here's BP's take. It is not an accurate portrayal of the events that led to the accident, our people, or the character of our company, the company said in a statement. In fact, it ignores the conclusions reached by every official investigation that the incident was the result of multiple errors made by a number of companies.
So it wasn't just BP, it was other people.
Yes, so they're spreading the blame.
Yeah, but you were a part of it. It's like we had that philosophy here. It's like, it's not just one person. If one person makes a mistake, we all make mistakes. And I think that was the thing, for BP. They were a part of the mistake.
Yeah, they got to accept their role in it. But I also get why they're not trying to accept their role in this.
Yeah, and apparently I believe there was a big BP settlement at the end of all this, and the indictment charges were what, dropped?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they were. So there you have it. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I would recommend this to people. If people have some idea of what happened, they know the oil rig exploded and had a bunch of oil spill into the Gulf, which did cause a big environmental disaster, but I think it's good for people to know why it happened. And I think this movie did a good job showing it.
And I'm glad they weren't, I think it's an environmental movie, but it's not environmentalist in the sense that it hits you over the head and is like, we shouldn't be doing this. It's just matter of fact.
Yeah, I think it would have added maybe just a little bit more. It's I liked at the ending, the end title credits, and we got the pictures of the actual families and the actual people and the actual rig that exploded. I think it would have been nice to do a then and now photo. The photos of what caused, the oil spilling, and then eventually, the Gulf Coast did bounce back eventually. And I think
cool.
Ended the film on a positive note.
No, it's the most positive, but
not a happier note.
Well, I think they were going for a more somber note, but
Okay.
it's a choice. It's a choice.
It is.
All right, and we choose to wrap this up. And you get to choose what you want to leave as a comment below in the section. We love talking with you guys. We love your guys' thoughts. You guys have very good takes. Let us know what you guys think about the actual oil spill, what you guys thought of this movie. Is it snuff film in any sense? Is it respectful of the events that occurred? Definitely would love to know from you guys, so let us know. And we've got a lot of things coming down the pipeline. Miss Peregrine's House of Peculiar Children.
Home for Peculiar Children.
Ah, Jesus. What a title.
It's a long title.
We've got, what do we got next week?
There's A Girl on the Train.
A Girl on the Train. Very anticipated movie.
Very, very. We might do A Birth of a Nation.
Yes, we're talking with our sister network, Black Hollywood Live, to kind of do a special for that one. And we've got a lot of stuff coming up. We're slowly getting into the Oscar type of movies, so it's going to be very, very interesting. Summer is officially over,
Yes.
and we're done with summer blockbusters. We've got Doctor Strange, though. Marvel, they don't care about summer blockbusters. They just, anytime.
Care about movies.
Yes. So we've got that coming up. I know Zach Wilson, who guests and who you guys know, if you're a fan, he's excited for that movie, so I'm sure he'll join with us for that. And a plethora of other things, including Patriots Day, which I think comes out in December, believe it or not.
Wow, you think it would come out in March?
You would think so. But anyway, thank you guys for joining us. At Serafini TV.
That's right.
At the Popcorn Talk. And definitely check out other movies. Zach Wilson is in the booth. He's at that Zach Wilson and also does a show called Sci-Fi Weekly here on Popcorn Talk. Check out all the other great shows. We've got a number of them. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
The views expressed herein are those of the host only, do not necessarily reflect the views of its owners or principals.